this later. Alrighty. So, we are talking today about where is it at? Oh, how life might have started. Okay, and there are three main. I'm just gonna fill up this whole thing. Okay, and I'm also going to shrink this down. All right, there are three main theories on how life began on Earth. Okay, so for all theories, it is projected or predicted, is thought that it began, it being life, 3.9 to 3.5 billion years ago. Okay. One of the reasons that we think that this started 3.9 to 3.5 billion years ago is that before that, so for the first probably half a billion to a billion years, Earth was being pelted by asteroids and meteorites so heavily that it was pretty much impossible for life to really start. But as we began to release gases into the atmosphere, whether it was through volcanic activity or through rocks releasing oxygen into the atmosphere as they cooled, we began to actually form a good atmosphere. And as we formed this atmosphere, the meteorites began to burn up in our atmosphere and began pelting our Earth a lot less. Okay, and so eventually we were able to form some sort of life. Okay, and now where we begin to talk about is, well, where did that life come from? Okay, and again, there are these three main potential ones. One that we're going to look at is kind of the prevailing theory, or the most popular of the three theories, which is the primordial soup. Okay, and so all life essentially starts from amino acids. You need amino acids to make up proteins. Proteins make up pretty much everything in your body, whether it's your DNA is not made of proteins itself, but it gets made by proteins. All of these sorts of different things are important, okay? And so in this primordial soup, we essentially had a bunch of ammonia, methane, and hydrogen. Okay? And what we believe happened here, and this was kind of shown by these two guys, Miller and Urey. Okay? Miller and Urey did experiments where they had all three of those, ammonia, so NH3, methane, which is CH4, and hydrogen, which is H2, all right, they had all of those things in a tube and would shock them with electricity. Okay, this electricity, this simulated lightning. Okay, and the energy from the lightning combined with the different compounds that we had, the ammonia, the methane, and the hydrogen. So the energy from lightning mixed with other compounds, such as the gases above, 1s and gases, 2s and gases, I never know, such as gases above, okay, combined with amino acids, 2 M's in amino, no, 1 M in amino, formed crude cells. Okay, so essentially they took lightning, ammonia, methane, hydrogen, and some amino acids. They put amino acids in there. But when they did all of these things, combined all of those different things, you are going to form these amino acids and form a really, really basic cell, okay? Now, the problem with this is that we were able to create some amino acids using this process. However, the main drawback or main problem is that the atmosphere on early Earth probably didn't have enough of the required gases to work. Okay, so we probably had a lot more how do I want to put this, you're gonna have a lot of carbon dioxide and water. Okay, that water vapor, carbon dioxide and water vapor are going to make up a lot of the atmosphere at this point in time, about 3.9 to 3.5 billion years ago. And those are not gases that are going to be making this. You need your ammonia, your methane, and your hydrogen to be making these amino acids. And so while it is plausible for sure, and this is the theory that we run off of being the most plausible, okay, the one that is probably the most correct, just due to the lack of gases, it's hard to make as many amino acids as we probably would have needed to. Okay, and again, amino acids make proteins, proteins make pretty much everything. All right, and so these guys made amino acids and then made cells, but the problem with their experiment is that there probably wasn't enough ammonia, methane, and hydrogen. Okay, so I'm going to take a quick break. Does anybody have any questions?
No.
No.
Okay, because I know that this can be confusing. This is one of the harder things to teach not in person. Just because I can, usually if we're sitting there talking, I can kind of at least see some confused faces and kind of dial it back. And this is confusing stuff. I mean, there is no real definitive answer to where life came from. Obviously, if there was, that would answer a lot of things. But we do have three primary ideas, roughly, of where these came from. Okay, so anyway, primordial soup is theory number one. All right. Theory number two. If nobody has any questions about theory number one, I will go and start number two. Okay. I don't want that. Okay. Okay. So number two. This is the deep Earth theory. Okay. And so this is essentially near thermal vents, okay, life began to form. Okay, so this is hydrothermal vents are vents at the bottom of the ocean where you are getting a lot of volcanic kind of gases coming out of there. There's a lot of heat. There's a lot of different sorts of gases coming out. All of these different things. This is where things that are known as extremophiles live. Okay, we currently have these. Extremophiles are things that love extreme areas, so places where nothing else can live. And so here, these extremophiles might have been taking the heat and thermal energy as source to use gases that make, God, I keep putting two S's in gases. So anyway, use heat and thermal energy as the source to use gases and combine them to make amino acids and then cells. Okay? And so we have these different things that are making the amino acids in the cells. And this is all plausible. All of the stuff down at this area near these, it works. We have, we've seen that things can form down there. However, the problem is with these really basic amino acids and basic cells, it's more than likely. So the main drawback of this theory is that it is too hot for things, two O's in that type of two, things to survive at this point. Okay, so many of these cells would have died or never even really formed in the first place due to all of these sorts of things. Okay, it's too hot. So while there are the components, there's probably outliers in terms of the problematic heat. Okay, so drawback on primordial soup, not enough of the required gases. Drawback on the deep earth theory, too hot for most things to survive. Okay, now we talk about our third and final one. Okay, the third and final one. All right, so third theory. Real quick, is there any questions about the second theory, about the deep earth? No? All right. Okay, and so the last one will be space. Okay, so this theory is that amino acids required to make life came from a meteorite hitting Earth that carried them. Okay, and so this is the final one. Now it's plausible, not necessarily, it's not impossible, but it's that we had some sort of amino acid carrying meteorite that hit the Earth, and it basically introduced them. But the plan is that when the amino acids were introduced to Earth's surface, ocean, they began to multiply and not prosper, create basic cells. Okay, and so all of this kind of checks out that this could happen, but the big drawback here is that we cannot test validity. Okay, validity, yep, of this. We have never found other amino acids on other planets. Okay, we don't know that there is anything else in space. There's nothing saying that this couldn't have happened, but there's no way for us to kind of say, oh yeah, this definitely did happen. Whereas with the primordial soup, Miller and Urey did experiments where they kind of proved, yeah, this will create amino acids if everything is there. And we can look at our hydrothermal vents now and see that, yes, we can create amino acids in life essentially at these depths. Just has to be the right kind of life, and the chances of that happening are very slim. due to the intense heat. They're called extremophiles for a reason. It is very extreme down there, okay? But regardless, however you look at it, one of these three or maybe another option, about 3.5 to 3.9 billion years ago, life first started to form. And we do have some evidence of that. But before I get into that evidence, does anybody have any questions? I'm going to stop sharing this. Anybody? Silence always isn't the best answer. Sometimes
Probably not.
perfect. I mean, I understand that, but it's hard to try and be engaging. You can also just type something over there if you want to. But anyway. So, if we don't have any questions about this sorts of stuff, we are going to start talking about, now that we know life has formed, let's start talking about the evidence and what kind of life has been forming, okay? So, all right. And time to reshare the screen and clear this. Okay, so all right, so first life that formed was prokaryotic, okay? Prokaryotic means cells with circular DNA and no nucleus, okay? These will be things like bacteria, all right? Bacteria are primarily prokaryotic, which makes sense because the first cells were something called cyanobacteria, okay? Cyanobacteria, this is a type of bacteria that does photosynthesis, okay? And at this point, we have everything that we need to do photosynthesis, right? This is the perfect thing. These things need carbon dioxide. There's plenty of carbon dioxide in the air. These things need sunlight, okay? And they need water. Once we get this rolling, these bacteria start to form this, okay? Evidence of cyanobacteria comes from stromatolites, okay? And I'm going to stop sharing the screen for a second, and I'm going to share this. Stromatolites. It's not stromatolites. Interesting. Okay. But so these are stromatolites. These kind of big globs of stuff. And this is essentially the waste from, get out of here. These are essentially the waste from cyanobacteria, things doing photosynthesis, these bacteria like this, all right? And so stromatolites, I'm going to go ahead and unshare that now and go back to the other screen. Change. Ugh. Okay. So stromatolites are the mounds of waste that cyanobacteria and other photosynthesizing bacteria produce. Okay, so we can see these things. We can see that there's evidence of this, and we can basically date them and see how old they are. Okay. After we start producing these, we are going to get simple eukaryotes. okay? Eukaryotes have, how do I want to put this? Nucleus. Jeez, I can't believe I forgot that. Okay, nuclei, I guess. So they have, everything's contained there. They also have more membrane-bound organelles. Okay, so organelles, if you guys don't remember from 7th grade, organelles would be small little organ-like things inside of a cell. So like your Golgi apparatus, ribosomes, the nucleus is one of those. You're going to have your endoplasmic reticulum, whether it's smooth or rough, and all of these things are doing different things. Essentially, even these simple eukaryotes are more complex, all right? So these are more complex. The oldest eukaryotes are roughly 2.1 billion years old, okay, or found 2.1 billion years ago, okay? And so for a long time, it was essentially this Earth that just contained a bunch of prokaryotes and eukaryotes, simple single-celled organisms. And then finally, after about, let's call it 3.8 billion years, okay, because we found that about 850 to 550 million years ago is when multicellular organisms began to form, okay? So these are things like us. We're multicellular organisms. These are the first things where it's not just single cells, okay? And what these are, what we would call these things that formed in this period between 850 and 550 million years are this word is hard to say. I'm just going to type it out first, and then I'm going to do my best. Ediacaran biota. Okay, so Ediacaran biota, and these are going to be soft-bodied, large, multi-celled organisms. Okay, usually these things would be rooted kind of where they are. And I will go ahead and share this one now. Get rid of the stromatolite one. Ediacaran biota are going to look very similar to this sorts of stuff. So they look kind of like, or if you're going to look at it, they'd look more like this. None of these have hard bodies, all right? Most of them are rooted. Some of these can kind of move around. These other ones, a lot of these, though, they look like plants, but they're not really plants. They have more of like a tube. These are starting to actually form really, really basic internal organs, all right? So you have all that sorts of stuff. But these Ediacaran biota, these are where complex life really began to kind of come on, okay? Some other things that will just be, and the reason that we know that these started to form is that we can see things like this, okay? These had soft bodies. They did not leave replacement fossils. They did, however, leave fossils where you will see imprints of things, okay? So molds, and then you can make a cast out of that. But yeah, so we're going to see our mold fossils more from these. Some of the other organisms that potentially could have formed back then that you guys would be more familiar with would be things like jellyfish, some worms. You might see some really, really basic arthropods, which is, I think, the most basic one that you could have seen. It's this thing called a trilobite, all right? So trilobites kind of look like bugs. They got this hard outer shell. The unfortunate thing is normally during this class, during this time, I would have given you guys some extra credit if you made cookies that look like these things. Some trilobite cookies, and made enough for the class. But anyway, these are one of the few fossils that we have that did make it due to the fact that they had harder outer shells. Okay, so there was a replacement layer to these fossils. All right, but either way, we had this Ediacardian biota. You had more complex life forming. Okay. No, I wanna type. Thank you. Okay. And so other organisms include jellyfish, segmented worms, and arthropods, trilobite. Okay, and these things lasted pretty well for several millions of years, okay? But eventually, at about 600 million years ago, so 550 to 600 million years ago, organisms began to go extinct. Okay, this is the first mass extinction. The Earth has gone through 5. We are kind of projecting that we might be in the 6th mass extinction. Not all of the life disappeared, but man, did a lot of life disappear. So most life is disappearing. Okay, and as this life disappears, we get to about 550 million years ago, okay? This mass extinction marks the end of the Precambrian time, okay? So we're no longer in Precambrian time. We do enter the Phanerozoic eon, okay, which is the eon that we're currently in. And we're going to start going into the Cambrian period. I think we'll probably call it today, because the next thing that I want to talk about is the formation of Earth's crust, and also talk about continents and supercontinents forming. But we will do that later. But before I end this meeting, does anybody have any questions about this life stuff? Once we get into the Cambrian period, there's a thing called the Cambrian explosion, where we get a lot more complex life, life that you guys would probably be more familiar with. All right? But I'm going to stop sharing my screen. James Fall says no. Does anybody else have any questions?
I sure don't.
Nope.
Nope.
No.
Perfect. All right. I'm going to stop